Hey YouTube, this is Justin. I wanted to make this video, but I don't want you to think that I'm making it so that I'm picking or pointing out a day and time that I think the rapture is happening. This video is mainly to encourage you that Jesus is coming, and it's also to, kind of warn you that he's coming soon and that we don't have much time. So we really need to get the word out that he's coming, and we need to get as many people saved possible as we can. So I really just want you to watch this from a educational point of view. Make what you will of it. I'm not saying that I'm a prophet, and I'm not saying that this is going to be the day of the rapture, because really no man knows. It could be sooner, and I hope so. I really hope it's sooner, but we really don't know. Just go ahead and watch my presentation, and then you decide for yourself. Thanks. I want to start with the creation week. If we go to Isaiah 46, 9 through 10, you'll see it says, Remember former things of old, for I am mighty, and there is none else, God, and there is none like me, declaring the beginning, the latter end, and from of old that which hath not been done, saying, My counsel doth stand, and all my delight I do. So we're focusing here where it says, Remember former things of old, declaring from the beginning, the later end, of old that which hath not been done. So we're seeing here in verse 9, it shows that the ancient times reveal things to come, where in verse 10 it shows that God declares the end from the beginning. Now I know the creation week actually starts in Genesis, so let's continue. In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, and the earth was without void, and so on. So we would probably want to start where it says nothing, because it starts with nothing, and then he created the heavens and the earth. And then the first day he created light, and that's how we actually started the days. So on the first day we start with nothing, and the actual day starts in nothing, and then it ends on the first day. Now the Jews follow the day cycles, ending at 6 p.m. to 6 p.m. the next day. So you go 6 p.m. to 6 p.m. So let's look at that. So we have 6 p.m. to 6 p.m. So starting with nothing until the first day. The first day being the day that he created light. So he created the day and the night, starting with the night first and creating the day. And then he divided the skies and the seas and the water. So if the light comes around and it ends from 6 p.m. to 6 p.m., we know that's the first day. So the second day is going to be when it ends at 6 p.m. the next day. So let's look at that. We have all 7 days lined up here. All of them starting at 6 p.m. and ending 6 p.m. Unlike the American way, where we start at 12 a.m. and end at 12 a.m. So we can't really follow that cycle. When we follow this this presentation on the Daniel's timeline and how I get to what I believe the rapture date could potentially be. So now we have the divide, the sky and the sea and the water, and then we have the dry land and all the plants. Then you have the moon, the stars, and the planets. And then he created the fish and the birds, and then he created man and animals. And then on the Sabbath, the seventh day, he rested. So hopefully we're going to see a pattern of 6 days and then a rest. We're going to see this pattern of 6 and then a day of rest, or a year of rest, or so on. We'll cover that. So the Jews actually follow a lunar calendar, starting with the sliver of the moon. That would be when the first day of the new year starts. It actually starts on a sliver of a moon. It looks almost like a sickle or a thumbnail. It's really small. And once they see that sliver of the moon, you know that the new year begins. And so that's how we're going to determine our first day of creation, our first actual calendar of creation. So if he created the moon on Wednesday through Thursday being the 5th day, we can assume that Thursday at 6 p.m. you would actually see the sliver of the moon. and then Friday and Saturday. So here's where the first day of the lunar calendar will actually start in history. This is when the moon first appears. So why am I covering the creation week, and how does it apply to the rapture and the end time events? God likes to tell the future by telling the past. In 2 Peter 3 verses 8, and this one thing let not be unobserved by you, beloved, that one day with the Lord is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as one day. This tells us that one day to God is like 1,000 years for man's reign on earth. If we believe the Bible to be true, then we can make some educated assumptions about how God does things. And I just love how he says, let not be unobserved. That means he wants us to actually pay attention to the one day equals 1,000. 1 year equals 1,000 years to God. He wants us to focus. He wants us to pay attention to that. So the creation of man, we scholars believe that Adam was created 4,000 years ago, roughly. Since there's some missing years throughout time. The Jews will admit to that. Everybody admits that we have lost days, we have lost years, and we don't know exactly when everything started. But let's assume that it started around 4,000 years ago, which is pretty close. So we have the creation of man, Adam, 4,000 years ago. Present day is 2,000 years AD, and then God's millennial reign would be 1,000 years. So if we look at this, you take 4,000 plus 2,000, that's 6,000 years. And then 6,000 plus 1,000 equals 7,000 years. So 7 days equals 7,000 years, right? 1 day in heaven, 1,000 years on earth. 7 days in heaven, 7,000 years on earth. Kind of cool. So now let's look at Daniel's timeline. In Daniel 9, chapter 24, it says, 70 weeks are determined for thy people and for the holy city to shut up the transgression and to seal up sins and to cover iniquity and to bring in righteousness age during and to seal up vision and prophet and to anoint the holy of holies. So from some starting point, there will be 70 weeks until God's rest, which is his 1,000-year millennial reign on earth. So I know that kind of sounds funny. I read it through the Young's literal translation, but you can most certainly look it up in the NIV if it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But let's go ahead and look at the word weeks. The word weeks is Hebrew, and it is Shabuah, which means feast of weeks or 1 year. So if we read this again, we can see that it says from some starting point there will be 70 years until God's rest, not 70 weeks, 70 years. So at the bottom we change 70 weeks to 70 years. All right. So now let's look at verse 25. And thou dost know and dost consider wisely from the going forth of the word to restore and to build Jerusalem till the Messiah the leader is 7 weeks and 62 weeks, the broad place hath been built again, and the rampart even in the distress of the times. So we know that from the day of the word going forth, that is the starting point, to the coming of the Messiah. This was written in Daniel, so this is addressed to the Jewish people, not to the church. We weren't around during the Old Testament, so what they're referring to here is the time where Jesus will come back on a white horse during the time of tribulation. He's going to come on the clouds with fire. So that's when he comes. Is on after 69 years after the word to restore Jerusalem. So we're trying to find out this word to restore Jerusalem. That's the starting point. But let's continue to verse 26. And after the 62 weeks, cut off is the Messiah, and the city and the holy place are not his. The leader who hath come doth destroy the people, and its end is with a flood, and till the end is war, determined are desolations. So here we find out that the 62 years after the word to restore Jerusalem went out, that the Messiah will actually be held back from ruling over the Israel for a time. So we have, if we take 70 and then 62, that gives us 7 years. But remember, he's coming after the 69, so that's actually a 6 year period that he'll be held back as 6 years, and then the 1 year that he comes back, and then Messiah's millennial reign. So scholars have agreed that this is 7 years, and in the midst, it leads to a halfway point in the 7 years. So I don't. I'm sorry. I'm going to go back. Um, and scholars believe that when they're referring to the prince, that it's referring to the Antichrist or the beast that causes the sacrifice at the temple to end. The beast will bring desolation to Jerusalem. So they think that somewhere in the middle of the 7 years, the beast or the Antichrist is going to cause desolation in Jerusalem. So I mean, that's where you get pre-trib, mid-trib, post-trib. Some people think it's going to happen right in the middle. Some people think it's going to happen right in the beginning, and some, of course, think it's going to happen right here where Yeshua comes in, right after the 6 years. So let's go ahead and continue. So where are we in God's time? To locate our year in God's time, we must follow God's patterns. We must also find moments in Scripture that He points out that give us clues to our current time. So in the Old Testament, God gave us His people patterns to follow, not only for their benefit, but I believe as a foreshadow of things to come. So let's look at His pattern. The Sabbath day is the 7th day of the week. The Sabbath week is the 7th month of the year. A Sabbath year is the 7th year of years. So on every 7th year, that is a Sabbath year. And then you have a Jubilee year, which is every 50th year. So you have 7 years times 7 years is 49 years. And then after those 49 years, the very first day of the 50th year is the Jubilee celebration day. And you're celebrating a Jubilee year. The whole year of the 50th is the Jubilee year. So we cannot calculate the Sabbath because we don't have a starting point. But we do have the most likely candidate, which is a Jubilee year. Scholars are claiming that the Six-Day War of 1967 initiated the last Jubilee year. Leviticus 25:10 through 11. And ye have hallowed the year, the 50th year, and ye have proclaimed liberty in the land to all its inhabitants. A jubilee it is to you, and ye have turned back each unto his possessions, yea, each unto his family you do turn back. A jubilee it is, the 50th year, a year it is to you. Ye sow not, nor reap its spontaneous growth, nor gather its separated things. So where are we in God's time again? We can follow it by following God's pattern. Jubilee lands on the 7th sabbatical year. It lands on the 7th month of the year, and it lands on the 7th day of the week. So we have God's number again. That's a pattern. 777. So a jubilee year, it basically says that it's every 50th year. Debts are forgiven, possessions returned, people are set free, a trumpet is sounded, lands and fall, Day of Atonement, and it is a year of celebration. So the Jubilee cycle began officially on the Day of Atonement, September 1967, plus 50 years equals September of 2017. We reason that the Six-Day War cannot indicate the time to begin this 50-year Jubilee cycle by biblical standards. We all know that the Six-Day War began on June 6, 1967, and lasted for 6 days, and then both Jerusalem and the Temple Mount were liberated. This time on the Jewish calendar was just a week away from the Feast of Pentecost. So for there to be an official Jubilee proclaimed for Jerusalem's liberation out of the hands of the Gentiles, we must assign the beginning of the year of Jubilee to the next Day of Atonement under the Levitical law. The Day of Atonement feast is the time when the Jubilee is proclaimed, and it looks as if September 1967 was that time. So, if man has a Jubilee year, does God have his own Jubilee year? So let's look at the creation week again. We have day 1 through 7, 7 being the rest. Now let's look at God's creation, or God's week, or the latter years. You have day 1 would be 4000 BC because one day equals to 1,000 years. So we're going to start I guess 4 days in the past, or 4,000 years BC, and then you have day 2 3000 BC, 2000 BC, 1000 BC, day 5 1000 AD, day 6 2000 AD. So I believe we're somewhere close to the end of day 6 in God's time, or 2000 years. And then obviously you have the 1000 years of rest. We're not there yet, so we must be somewhere before the 2000 years comes to the end. So let's look at Adam was born or came about in the beginning. So 4000 BC. 40 jubilees would take you to 2000 years where Abraham was. And then another 40 jubilees takes you another 2000 years to Yeshua or Jesus. And then you have 40 jubilees again, which would take you to pretty close to the present time. We're almost there. The rest. God's rest. So if you take 40, 40, 40, that's 120 jubilees. Where else do we see the 120 jubilees? Genesis 6:3. And Jehovah saith, My spirit doth not strive in man, to the age, in the erring they are flesh, and his days have been 120 years. Now I put a number there, number 8141, because the word years in Hebrew, the Hebrew dictionary says it's called shaneh. So if we look down here through the Hebrew word study, 1 year, a measure of time, an indication of age, or a lifetime of years of life. So we're going to go with, indication of age, a lifetime of years of life. That could be 1,000. I'm sorry, a lifetime of years, or a years of life. We believe this to be, he's talking about jubilee years. So that would be every 50 years. So now that we have the Jubilee year of 1967, we can add the final Jubilee year to get our end date where the Messiah comes back to rule and reign. So if we take the Day of Atonement in 1967 plus 50 years and we add this up, we come to the special date of September 30th of 2017, which is the Day of Atonement on the Jewish calendar. This also is the day that the great trumpet will sound and a year of Jubilee will begin for all the world. So now that we have a Jubilee year of 1967 and an end date of 2017, we can plug it in. Just to recap on Daniel 9:25, and it says, Thou dost know and consider wisely from the going forth of the word to restore till the Messiah, the leader, is. So that's when the Messiah comes. So let's see that. Let's go backwards to see what kind of word went forth. If we take the day 2012 and subtract 70 years, we get the year of 1947. Now that we know the year, we can search in history for events pertaining to Israel. On November 29, 1947, Israel became a nation of their own. This happened right before the Jewish New Year. So we take 2017 and we go back 70 years. That takes us to 1947. Israel became a nation. This also fits the parable of the fig tree nation. Israel is that fig tree nation. And from the fig tree, learn ye the simile, when already its branches may have become tender, and the leaves it may put forth. Ye know that summer is nigh. So also ye, when ye may see all these, ye know that it is nigh at the doors. Verily I say to you, this generation may not pass away until all these may come to pass. So the generation that was alive, that new generation that started at the beginning of a nation becoming Israel becoming a nation, they're not going to pass away. The uh, the generation that was born during that time. So the parable is simply using the budding of the fig tree to illustrate a point about his second coming. When spring comes and the trees put out new leaves, we know that summer is not far off. In the same way, we will know Christ's return is near when we see the events he mentions earlier in Matthew chapter 4 begin to occur. So let's plug in the rest of these dates, now that we have our start and finish dates. So if we take 2017 minus 69 years, we get the Messiah coming down on a white horse to rule with an iron scepter, year 2016. We take 2017 minus 62 years, we get the start of the tribulation week, 7 years. This starts in the year 2010. But since the Jewish New Year starts in the fall, it will start on our calendar in September of 2009. Let's zoom in on the 7 years of tribulation, or 6 in my opinion. We really have to reevaluate the 7-week tribulation because it doesn't seem to match God's pattern. The seventh day is rest, so there must only be 6, right? Nowhere in the Bible does it actually say that there will be a 7 years of tribulation. People get that from where it talks about the Antichrist will confirm a peace treaty of 7 years, and then he will, you know, go against the peace in the midst, and we'll cover that in some future slides. But it never actually says that there will be a 7-week tribulation. So I wanted to show you this, which is it shows our years and the dates that would line up would match with the very first day of each year in the Jewish calendar. Remember, they don't follow our type of calendar. They actually follow it by moons, and they'll even skip a few months throughout several years, making sure that everything lines up according to the moons. And this is actually all biblical. So what we're going to follow here, so we're going to follow the first of Tishri. The first of Tishri is always the very first day of the beginning of the year for the Jews, and they count the years by 5,728. Kind of like I was showing you before, 4,000 BC all the way up till 6,000. So they've got their dates wrong. They don't really know, and they admit to it. They don't know where we are in the days. So they got us. They're off by some hundreds of years. So let's look at this. October 5th, 1967 would be the first of Tishri of year 5,728. 50 years later, we would have September 29th, 2011, which is Thursday, the first of Tishri for the Jews on 5772. So that would actually be the start of the new year of what we're calling, the 7-year tribulation period, or I would like to just call it the time between, I would just say it's the period between the time that Jesus returns and what it was mentioned there, and what we covered earlier. I don't really want to call it a tribulation because it does mention there's a tribulation in the Bible, but it actually mentions it as a great tribulation, and it doesn't actually refer to a full 7 years. The great tribulation is actually only 3.5 years, and everybody assumes that it's because of the other scripture where it says it's in the midst of the week. They're assuming that there was a tribulation beforehand, and then there's a 7-year or a 3.5-year tribulation after the midpoint, and it actually doesn't say that. And it's all speculation. So I'm going to put it and call it 6 years of Messiah's cut off. That's how I'm going to word it. So we start on September 9th, 2011, showing you up here in that comparison calendar I show you up here. It starts September 9th, 2011. I put a halfway point in here of the 6 years. Not necessary. It's just kind of for a visual. And then over here, 2017, September 21st would start the 1,000 years of peace. So how does the rapture fit into these dates? Finding these dates help us narrow down the end. I happen to be a pre-tribulation, or the time that the Messiah is cut off. I'm a pre-tribulation believer, and I have a very good reason to believe so. However, I believe we are already in the so-called tribulation, and I never did believe that we would escape the whole thing, because even Jesus talks about in Matthew that there will be times of trouble, tribulation. Now he's not talking about this 7-year tribulation period. Tribulation just means it's a word for trouble. There will be times of trouble, and it says that the earth will be travailing, like she's about to give birth. So I mean, it talks about how we're going to go through troubles, in these last days before he comes to catch us away or rapture us to heaven. So I believe we are also somewhere in the beginning of the tribulation. I have a theory on how it could be this year in September of 2012, in which I'm going to cover. Let's watch a clip from Perry Stone's The Rapture Revelation. I think you'll find it very interesting and insightful.
Very simple. All you got to do is understand barley and wheat, and you have to understand the field. Okay, let's pretend let's pretend all this is not a TV set, but this is a field of barley. Okay, first harvest, the priest has to go in there and pull that barley up, present it to the Lord at the temple, offering a lamb at first fruits. That's a picture of the church being raptured, the overcomers. What's ripened first in the field, what believes first, the overcoming remnant. Then you get to the wheat harvest, and they present that to the Lord, and of course that's separated. That makes the two loaves. But understand this, that in a harvest you have first fruits first. Then when the rest of the field is ripe, you get the rest of the field. Okay. Then the third part of the harvest is the gleaning. You leave the four corners of the field open. One of the laws of God is that you leave the four corners of the field open. Now listen, he shall send his angels with the great sound of a trumpet. They shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. All right? Listen to Deuteronomy. After the main harvest, there's a law of gleaning. The four corners of the field has grain that still remains. After the rapture and 144,000, there is still a small remnant on earth in the four corners of the earth. God will not lose this grain. All right? There's a lot of scriptures we could get into here, but let me just explain this to you again. Once the church is raptured out, that still leaves billions of people on earth, which is the harvest. Out of that harvest, other people will ripen. People that make their robes white with the blood of the Lamb, the 144,000, and they are then caught up. We've already showed you that. But then when it's all said and done, and the judgments of the earth come, God leaves four corners of the field standing, which is the gleaning. That's why in Matthew 24, at the end of the tribulation, the angels are going to those four corners to gather that grain which has been left standing. It's not been crushed. It's not been destroyed. It's not, the grapes of God's wrath have not told it. There's a small remnant that still remains, and he will gather them and bring that elect to Jerusalem. That's not the church. That is not the rapture. That is a whole different thing that deals with the law of harvest. First fruits go first. That's the rapture. Then the other parts of the field go. Those are the people that die in the tribulation that are martyred, the 144,000 you see in the book of Revelation. At the end, Jesus comes back. There's four corners remaining, four corners of the earth. There's little remnants and pockets all over. He gathers the elect, not the church. That's really, again, that was addressed to Jews. That is more of a Jewish remnant. So I hope you can understand that, this law of gleaning, okay? Because there will be people that will miss the rapture who will give their life in the tribulation period. That's very, very, very clear.
Let's take a look at the harvest scenario and apply it to our timeline. The four corners is the elect, and we can place them at the end, as you can see in my diagram at the bottom. The main harvest is near the end, but it's not at the end. The last but not least is the first fruits, aka the church, and it comes first. As you can see, it's somewhere up around 2012-13. There are 7 Jewish feasts we should look into, and their importance. The Passover. Jesus was the spotless lamb that was slain as our Passover. The Feast of Unleavened Bread. Yeast is a symbol of sin, and Jesus, like unleavened bread, as he was sinless. The Feast of First Fruits. Jesus is a representation of the first fruit when he was taken up to God. the Feast of Weeks, or Pentecost. The Holy Spirit was given in the upper room on the day of Pentecost, so that fulfilled that one. The Feast of Trumpets, not fulfilled yet. The Day of Atonement, not fulfilled yet. The Feast of Tabernacles, not fulfilled yet. The Feast of Tabernacles, and it seems like God has a pattern. He seemed to do all of these in the correct order. He did the Passover first, then the Feast of Unleavened Bread, then the Feast of First Fruits, and then the Feast of Weeks or the Pentecost. He did all those in the right order. So it's logical to think that the next one he's going to fulfill is the Feast of Trumpets. So I want to focus on this one, and let's watch another clip from the same YouTube video from Perry Stone.
The Feast of Trumpets is the only feast where you look up in the sky and there's no moon. So to start the feast, you have to see the little sliver of the moon appear. Now, for that to happen, here's what they would do. There was a Jewish Sanhedrin, which had 70 members in the time of Jesus, for example, and the high priest presided over the Sanhedrin. There had to be two witnesses to identify that both of them had seen the silver sliver of the moon. These two witnesses would then go into Jerusalem and tell the priest, we've seen the silver sliver of the moon, because of the mouth of two or three witnesses, every word's established. So they say it, the priest recognizes it, so that's the mouth of three witnesses. Then they would know it was time to start the feast of the time of blowing of trumpets, which is the Feast of Trumpets. And so how did they let the Jews know? They lit fires. There would be a fire on Mount Scopus, then a fire on the next mountain on Hebron, and a fire. In fact, in just a few hours, the Jews in Babylon would know that it was time to start the feast anywhere around the world, because they set up fires on the mountains about the time that these feasts were to start. So when the witnesses gave the identification of seeing the silver sliver of the moon, they knew that it was going to begin. Now here's my point. Now don't miss this. According to what Jesus said, no one knew the day or the hour. Are you listening? No man knew the day or the hour that the feast was going to begin. They had to wait until it was identified. So in other words, every other feast was on first day, 7th month, 14th day, 7th month, whatever. And this was on the first day of the 7th month. But because it centered on the new moon, there was a 48-hour window when no one knew when it was going to occur. Now, some scholars, and I'd have to contend that this is probably so, believe that when Jesus said nobody knows the day or the hour, the Jewish audience that he was speaking to would have understood that he was talking there about the time of trumpets, where there's a 48-hour window, and they would allude and say, okay, the Messiah's coming, there's going to be a blowing of trumpets. He's telling us something here that it should occur during that time, somewhere during that feast time. And of course, you don't know the exact day, you don't know the exact hour. That's the way it was in Christ's day. Of course, now they keep a Jewish calendar and they can tell you exactly when it's going to start. But still, no one knows the exact hour of his return. So that's an interesting point to bring out. Now, another thing is this, that in the Jewish synagogue on Rosh Hashanah, pardon me, this is a verse that is read, Psalms 47:5. God is gone up with a shout, the Lord with the sound of a trumpet. Now, what else? There's your rapture picture right there. The Lord is gone up with the shout. He will come with the shout, the voice of the archangel, and the trumpet of God. The Lord has gone up with the shout, and it talks about he's gone up with the sound of a trumpet. So, beautiful. When is it read? It's read on the time of the day of the Feast of Trumpets. Now,
What? You mean there was a day known as the day that no man knew the day or the hour? All because of the appearance of a moon? Let's keep watching.
on the Feast of Trumpets, again called Rosh Hashanah, there are 4 types of sounds that are sounded on that feast, and I want to give those to you. The first is called Tekiah, which means to awaken. The second is called Shevarim, which means to be broken. The third is called Teruah, which is to sound the alarm. And the fourth is called Tekiah HaGodolah, which is the last and longest of all of the trumpet sounds. The Tekiah is just a blast to awaken people. The Shevarim is it's a broken sound. The Teruah is another different kind of sound. In other words, it's not a different shofar they use. They blow it a different way to make different sounds is what this is. And the fourth one, and this is very important, the very last trumpet sound on the Feast of Trumpets is when the person blowing the shofar will hold his breath and breathe out into the shofar and hold it as long and loud as he can, as much air as he has. So it's the longest and loudest of all the sounds.
Now let's find out when the next Feast of Trumpets will occur. According to Jewish calendars, the next Feast of Trumpets will land on September 17th of 2012. There are also signs of large earthquakes, many volcanoes erupting all over the world, and not to mention the rumors of wars with Iran and Israel. We're having tsunamis. We're having, like the large earthquakes. We're talking about birds dying. We're talking about fish in massive numbers are dying. We are in the end times as it is spelling out in the Bible. So we have our potential rapture date on September 17th, 2012. Jesus said there would be signs in heaven and in earth. So let's go ahead and have a look at the heavens for the signs of our Lord's return. Revelations 11:2 through 3 says, "And there was given to me a reed like to a rod, and the messenger stood, saying, Rise and measure the sanctuary of God, and the altar and those worshipping in it. And the court that is without the sanctuary leave out, and thou mayest not measure it, because it was given to the nations in the holy city. They shall tread down 42 months. There's that 42 months again, which is 3.5 years. Now, I don't believe that happens in the middle. I think that happens somewhere in the beginning, actually. But we'll continue. So I want you to see this video I found on YouTube. There are 6 different people who caught this event on YouTube on video. And the one I will show you, it shows all of them. They are synced in the same timeline, so it can actually be verified that it was a real event. Just watch and see how it applies to the scriptures. If this was John measuring the temple, then things are truly getting closer. Revelations 12:1 through 4. And a great sign was seen in heaven, a woman arrayed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And being with child, she doth cry out, travailing and pain to bring forth. And there was seen another sign in the heaven, and lo, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his head 7 diadems. And his tail doth draw the third of the stars of the heaven, and he did cast them to the earth. And the dragon did stand before the woman, who is about to bring forth that when she may bring forth her child, he may devour. And she brought forth a male child, who is about to rule all the nations with a rod of iron, and caught away was her child unto God and his throne. And the woman did flee to the wilderness, where she hath a place made ready for God, that there they may nourish her days 1,260. So, let's have a look at this video that I created using Stellarium and how it pertains to this particular scripture. Stellarium is a free program that you can get on the internet that allows you to look at the stars and the planets and how they orbit the sun. You can go into the past, you can go into the future just by typing in a couple of different dates. You can also point in locations other than your own location. For instance, I am looking from Jerusalem. Now, I have changed my time on my computer to be the time of Jerusalem, or else it wouldn't coincide with Stellarium correctly. So I'm in Jerusalem. My computer is set to Jerusalem time. So I'm actually going to go through this with you. I have the date set to September 17th of 2012. It is currently on Stellarium 6 o'clock p.m. So that would be the start of the new day. Here's the sliver of the moon, and it's not zooming in for some reason. There we go. So you can see the sliver of the moon right there. That's we're basically starting the Rosh Hashanah here, or the Feast of Trumpets, because we have now seen the sliver of the moon. So now we can start our Feast of Trumpets, which is a 2-day period. It is the day known as the day that nobody knows the day or the hour, because it takes up 2 days, and it could be this day or that day. So you really don't know. Now with Stellarium and technology, we can almost count on it being on this day. We still don't know what day he's going to come. I want to point this out. In Stellarium, you can actually view the constellations. You can actually even kind of see an image, so you know what you're dealing with. And then the names. And just so we can kind of get a better, clear picture, I'm actually going to turn the atmosphere off so we don't have this white haze. Now you can see the stars a little bit better. There's the moon, there's the sliver. But I'm going to go ahead and move this forward in time. And we're going to go to the next morning. We're still in day 1 of Rosh Hashanah. All right, we already passed the morning. Now we're back at the day is over, and the moon is right here at her hips. So we're going to keep going. So this is the ending of the first day of Rosh Hashanah, and now we have the second day. We're going to keep going forward. So I want to focus here around maybe 6 o'clock. Let's see here. When does she start showing up? It's like 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14. There she is. So now it's basically 9 o'clock. I'm sorry, 6 o'clock. And if we kind of look at it here, and just zoom in a little bit, if I turn on the atmosphere, she is clothed in the sun. It will appear that you won't even see the stars. It will be so bright. The sun will be so bright you won't even be able to see any of this. You might be able to see the moon a little bit, but you definitely won't see the constellation. So I'm going to turn that off again because it makes it difficult to see. And then I'm going to zoom in here. So she's clothed in the sun. She actually has a crown of 12 stars, which is back here behind her head. That's not part of her constellation. It's a different set of stars, but they're right there above her head. She has the moon under her feet, and then here is Saturn. Saturn in Jewish culture and history is known as the planet. They named it the planet called King of the Jews. That is the name of the planet in history. And Jupiter was named King of the Planets. So this one is actually named King of the Jews. And I thought the symbolism in that, or in the name, is very interesting because Jesus is considered the King of the Jews. So here we have a representation in the stars. We have Virgo, the Virgin. She's clothed in the sun. Which means she had the glory of God upon her. She is giving birth to the King of the Jews. The moon is under her feet. The stars are in her head. The only thing that's missing here is the dragon. So there's a couple of other constellations here that we could pay attention to. For instance, we have the Serpens, which is it's a snake, or we have Draco, which is above, and I can't seem to get this thing to turn. See, here's Draco right here. But it says it was waiting to devour the child. Now, I don't see that. I don't see where there's any signs of this. Now, there's something that you may have heard of or may not. There is currently a lot of talk on YouTube about a planet or a dwarf star heading into our galaxy, and that everybody's calling it Nibiru, or some are calling it Planet X, or even some are calling it Wormwood. As the Bible depicts, there is a star that comes to the planet called Wormwood that makes the waters bitter. So if God says there's a star, then there probably is a star coming our way that we're not aware of. At any rate, this planet is a red planet or a red dwarf star. It actually has the color of red. And it's just so interesting that it calls it a. I, I remember calling it a red dragon. And it says that in its tails it will cast down a third of the stars. Well, it just so happens that Nibiru, this potential or fictitious star, as NASA puts it, uh, that's heading our way. NASA will lay no claim to it whatsoever. But there are so many people out there that believe this planet is heading our way, and it actually carries a trail of debris, like meteorites, with it, and it actually looks like a tail. And it could very well be that this Nibiru planet that's being hid by the by NASA and the government could be heading our way with its tail of debris that will as it passes our planet, the debris could hit our planet. And I just wanted to show you this interesting tidbit on Google Sky. This is Virgo in Google Sky. The lines aren't the same as Stellarium. They're supposed to draw a line like right here and right there. And so Saturn would be in here somewhere. And then I'm going to turn this on infrared so you can see this. This is what I'm calling the NASA/government cover-up. And if you look up Nibiru on the internet, you will find lots of information about this planet and cover-ups, government cover-ups. I'm going to go to infrared. And whoa, what is this black spot here that NASA has decided to block out, or the government block out this particular item on the screen? It so happens to be coming from the constellation Virgo. Interesting, isn't it? So it could be that this planet is waiting to devour the child. Maybe that is the symbolism that is in the scripture of how the red dragon's going to come and try to devour the child, but then Saturn ends up going the other direction, ends up going to the left, and then of course Nibiru would end up coming more our direction. So I just thought I would point that out. So let's go back to Stellarium. So all the elements are here. I mean, you could say this is the dragon, but really it's a serpent, and Draco the dragon is over there. So that doesn't really line up so much. And there's really no other constellations that you could say is a dragon. So the Nibiru one sounds pretty interesting. So you decide on that one. So what does this verse mean? How will this play out in future events? I have looked up some studies on this verse, and I found one that I believe to be correct. The woman represents Israel as a nation. The 12 stars represents the 12 tribes of Israel. The child is actually in two parts. You have the head, which is Jesus, and the body, which is the church. And I love the symbolism here, because when you have a baby, the head comes out first, followed by the body. I'll let you chew on that one for a little bit. The dragon is Satan. And then the safe place is, scholars believe to be Petra, Jordan. But nobody really knows for sure. So there are also these signs in the heavens. So what's up with all the signs? We have what we call a tetrad. And it's where you have 4 blood moons in a row, and they all happen to be on. You have blood moons, and you have solar eclipses. And they all happen on Jewish feasts. You have the Passover, the Sukkot, and it seems to be late. I mean, you can see the dates here. April 14th, 2014. All of these events are happening in the future. Why right there? Why concentrate it right there? Could that be the Great Tribulation that they talk about being the 3.5 years until Jesus comes? If that's true, and we leave before that Great Tribulation, we got to leave somewhere between 2012 and 13, if indeed that is true. all speculation still. Basically, my point of making this video is just to let you know that he is coming, and are you ready? That's the biggest question. You know, it's been really heavy on my heart to try to find out what's kind of going on with the signs, with Syria, with Iraq, Iran. You have all these things that are happening in the Middle East. I mean, you have ships pulling in to the harbors, into the ports, into the Gulfs. They're all. It looks like we're all getting ready for battle. China, Russia, Korea. There's just so much controversy right now going on. And I mean, with this right here, that's. I mean, it's just amazing. All these things are happening right now. The world has become more corrupt and more corrupt and more corrupt as days progress. We no longer allow God in our schools. We no longer have God in our anthem. I mean, God is not in this nation anymore. So I just wanted to say, are you ready? If you're not ready, get to know Jesus. Find a church. Find a Bible believing church and get to know Jesus. I wanted to also let you know that I found a audio. It's a radio show, and it's with these guys, and they're a bunch of watchmen that are kind of gathered together, and they're talking about all the different dreams, visions, experiences they've had, and how God has been talking to them or whatever. And even they are lining up with this year. I mean, that things are like coming down to the wire this year. I'm going to put a link to that underneath this YouTube video so that you guys can hear it as well. I was blown away by what they were saying, and it's actually lining up with the September, this September Rapture. So please watch that link, watch that video. Just go to the link underneath the video. So thank you for watching.